So the cheese stands alone. The cheese stands alone. The cheese stands alone. The cheese stands alone. Why do you need a piece of cheese? So you can catch a rat. And who's the rat? The American people. And what's the cheese that's being used? $1,200. So John Kerry said that Thomas Massie has tested positive for being an asshole. So John Kerry is making a mockery of this whole coronavirus thing, right? Tested positive, it sounds like, oh no, for being an asshole, he's making a joke. Because, you know, John Kerry is known for his comedic wit. Now, Donald Trump, the president, he says that Thomas Massie is a third-rate grandstander. And Thomas says, I'm at least a second-rate grandstander. Nancy Pelosi called Thomas Massie a dangerous nuisance. How can a nuisance be dangerous? Oh my God, it's a nuisance! That nuisance is coming right for us! We're all going to die. So Thomas Massie, he just didn't vote for their bill. He just was one little dissenter, right? One little dissenter for this big $2.2 trillion spending bill that the Treasury and the Fed gets $4 trillion. So it's a $6 trillion spending bill, a $6 trillion spending bill. And $4.5 trillion of it is going to go for the Fed and the Treasury, who's going to give it to the big banks and the corporations and what have you. So the cheese stands alone, right? The cheese stands alone. Thomas Massie, he was the only person that I know of that had not voted for it. They said that he was prolonging. Oh no, he's going to take an extra day. You know, what Thomas Massie wanted was for everybody to show up to Congress to vote, to make it a matter of public record. Who voted for it? Who didn't vote for it? People say AOC. You know, Bernie Sanders and AOC, a lot of people comes out and gives lip service just like in TARP. So a lot of people come out and they say they hate this bill. And you know, it's terrible, it's a big sellout, but then they go out and vote for it anyways. AOC was there. Did she vote for it or did she not? It sounded like she probably did by her, you know, floor speech, but she condemned it. So people say, oh, this bill is terrible, and then go right back and vote for it. So we don't have too many people. You had Rand Paul, who stood up against it. You had Thomas Massie stood up against it. Bernie Sanders and AOC gave speeches against it. But this is being held as just unanimous. The entire American government is A-OK with putting all this fucking money in the hands of Wall Street. Unanimously, 96-0 in the Senate. So 4 people didn't show up, but the senators showed up. So they expected the senators to show up, but the House of Reps, they could stay home. So Thomas Massie is kind of showing that a lot of people on the right and the left realize that this is a bad bill. He's not going to vote. Why should he be forced to vote for a bad bill? This bill is the biggest spending bill in the history of mankind. $6 trillion. Can you imagine the Romans or the Greeks or the Huns or any empire before ours spending that much money? $6 trillion. This is the biggest spending bill in the history of mankind. This is a major Wall Street bailout. And all the votes should have been recorded. All the votes should have been recorded. Everybody in the House that voted for it or voted against it. Somebody had bragged that the House was unanimous too. Not fucking true. Not true. Why weren't the votes recorded individually? Because it's politics. Because their votes wouldn't age well. They wanted to pass this bill without getting any of the, you know, heat for it. So did you vote for it? Did you vote against it? Now nobody can tell. Now nobody knows. So they all have plausible deniability. But Thomas Massie, I watched an interview with him, and this is, you know, just me basically repeating everything he said in my own words. And I quote him, he says it's a bad bill. It's the biggest spending bill in the history of mankind. He pointed out that 96 of 100 senators could show up, and they're old. But the House of Reps aren't supposed to show up. So Nancy Pelosi wanted a voice vote, quick up and down. Not everybody gets, you know, their vote recorded so it doesn't hurt them politically. So yeah, we needed to know this. Thomas Massie himself said he only knew 4 off the top of his head that would vote against it. Alex Mooney, Andy Bix, and Ken Buck out of Colorado, and somebody else. And he apologized if they weren't going to do it. It just, by the way that they were talking about it, he assumed that they would vote against it. So even his 4 buddies that he thought would vote against, he wasn't for sure about it. Now, Thomas Massie said that there was 1 or 2 good things about his, one-man boycott. He got everybody to read Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution. In order to have a quorum, Congress has to have at least half of the members. The reps have to have at least 216 members in the House in order to have a quorum, in order for their vote on a bill to actually matter, to actually count, for it to actually be official. So you need a quorum. So Thomas Massie was just saying, we got to listen to the Constitution. Everybody else read Article 1, Section 5, and they're like, oh shit, we do need half of Congress to get a quorum. So Thomas Massie set a precedent. So he got everybody to read Article 1, Section 5, so we all got a constitutional history or constitutional lesson. But he also set a precedent to standing up against the next $6 trillion spending bill. They're working on a 4th coronavirus spending bill. $6 trillion, maybe it'd be $27 trillion. Who the fuck knows? It's quantitative easing infinity. They're just going to keep printing up more and more money. Monetary, MMT says that's, God, that's what we should do. We should never tax anybody and just print the money up and pay for all the services that we... So some congressman had rode on horseback during a hot war to get the Congress to vote. That's another Thomas Massieism. So Thomas Massie is sitting there saying that a congressman rode on horseback. This is Revolutionary War. So they sit there and say, oh, we got a little cold. Meanwhile, everybody in Amazon and the truck drivers and everybody, still keeping America going, they're putting their lives out, they're putting themselves out on the limb. They're putting their lives in danger. And yet congressmen can't even show up to go vote. So $6 trillion, Thomas Massie points out that out of that $6 trillion, $2 trillion is being spent by Congress. But the Treasury and the Fed, they're getting $4 trillion. And Thomas Massie says that should tell you who runs the government, who runs this government, not our government, but this government. Right there. He also said that if he was nominated as the chair of the Federal Reserve, he would just quit, and therefore the Fed would dissolve and there would be no more Fed. But the Treasury and the Federal Reserve spent $2 more trillion in Congress did? Congress, I think they're taking it from the $500 billion, doing some, their little commercial paper, some of their mortgage-backed securities, some of their credit default swap derivative, sort of the hedge fund manager, just some magic tricks, some for financial accounting magic tricks, some fraud, right? Some fucking bullshit fraud. And they're turning that $500 billion into $4 trillion. But regardless, they get $4 trillion. $4 trillion of wealth is going to be created. $2 trillion is spent by Congress. $250 billion going to the American people, to the $1,200 checks, the $1,200 pittance. So $250 billion of the $6 trillion is going to the American people, but that's 5%. Who gets 90 to 95% of the $6 trillion? Wall Street gets 95% of the $6 trillion. Wall Street, big businesses, corporations, Boeing, all these people that can get loans and they can get liquidity. Can you get liquidity from the Fed? Then they're not talking about you. So $6 trillion, $2 trillion, $4 trillion, is going to the Treasury and the Fed. Only $2 trillion spent by Congress, $500 billion going to the Fed, $250 going to the American people. What's the rest of it going to go to? Thomas Massie did some quick math saying that a family of 3 essentially gets $3,000, but a family of 3 actually gets $60,000. If you took the $6 trillion and divided by all Americans, 100 households or so, he says that's $60,000. So if they're getting $3,000 of their $60,000, who the hell is getting the $57,000? Who's getting all the rest of the money? Who's getting 95% of the $6 trillion? 95% of the $6 trillion is going somewhere else. That's a direct quote from Thomas Massie. 95% of the money is going somewhere else. 95% of the $6 trillion is going somewhere else. So, Americans, right, maybe you'll get your $1,200 pittance. Maybe you won't. Maybe you won't. $250 billion only makes up the small percentage, maybe 5 to 10%. And meanwhile, right, you got $500 billion corporate liquidity program of the $2 trillion coronavirus, number 3 of Congress, and now they're talking about a 4th one. So how many more trillions of dollars does the Fed and the Treasury want? Thomas Massie said a lot of stuff. Thomas Massie talked about how a lot of people have lied to Americans. I think even maybe the CDC. Now they're basically, talking down to Americans, thinking that Americans don't understand scarcity. So people are buying all those masks. Those masks would be good for the sick and it would be good for the healthy. It's good for everybody. The way that you catch it is a person that has the virus breathes it out, and then a droplet, it coughs or sneezes, or you kiss them, and then they do it back to you, that droplet, and you spit out something in your lungs and it goes into their lungs. So it has to go through the mouth and the nose to cover up the sick, the mouth and the nose of the sick, and to cover up the mouth and the nose of the healthy is good. It's double protection. Double protection to make sure that the sick isn't spreading their stuff and the healthy doesn't catch the stuff. That's a good thing. But a lot of people are lying. N95, they call the face mask, the popular face mask, N95 because they're 95% effective in making sure that, all the debris isn't breathed into. So it gets rid of 95%. It's not everybody. But, he was talking about how a lot of people were lying to Americans. He didn't like that. When he was talking about the money, he said Nancy Pelosi got $25 million for the Kennedy Center. So that's an earmark, right? Nancy Pelosi went ahead and pocketed $25 million for her buddies. The Kennedy Center, probably a good thing. But he's talking about how many other people put earmarks into this bill. How many other earmarks were stuffed into this bill that nobody knew anything about? Voice vote. Nobody read the damn thing. Nobody really knows what's actually going on except for a few power brokers. So $25 million for the Kennedy Center. That was Nancy Pelosi. But then Thomas Massie goes on and he says, we're going to find out eventually what all the earmarks were. So we don't even know. We'll eventually find them out. But he was talking about, think about how big a trillion is. A trillion is a million millions. So there could be a million earmark projects stuffed into the bill and you wouldn't even know about it. A million millions. A million millions. And so he's like, that's not even the big thing. It's not that, Boeing got $17 billion. It's not that Kennedy Center got $25 million. It's not that we could have got rid of homelessness in America for $5 billion. No, that is what it's like. We're spending trillions of dollars, $6 trillion, and what are we getting for it? Okay, so homelessness, $5 billion would have been, the pittance, the $250 billion that went to American people, that could have been used. I would have gladly give up my $1,200 check to end homelessness in America. $5 billion is all it would have cost. And we would be building houses. There's a housing crisis. Mortgages and rents are going up and up and up. So we need more housing, more apartment complexes, more buildings. So that's, the $5 billion would go towards building brand new houses for the homeless, which is good for the economy overall. Get people in houses. That's how you help the economy out. You help their personal economy out, and that helps everybody. But Thomas Massie specifically pointed out one big gaping hole. So we have a coronavirus epidemic. So the first thing we got to do is we got to test everybody, right? And then the people that get sick, we need to treat them and get them hospital beds. And if they, lose their jobs, give them unemployment and what have you. But the first thing is you got to test everybody. That North Korea, they act like they have no cases. Well, they're liars, right? So who the fuck cares what North Korea says? But a lot of countries are not testing. So when it says, New York and California have all of them in all these rural countries, these rural counties and states, Africa, they're just doing such a good job with their, immune systems and their medicine. No, we're not doing testing. So let's assume that testing is $100 per test. He says that's estimating it on the higher end. So $100 per, 350 million Americans, which I think is also another higher estimate. But you got 350 million Americans, a $100 test. That's $35 billion. That's $35 billion. We had $2 trillion in the Congress, plus the $4 trillion in the Fed and the Treasury Department. So out of $6 trillion, we couldn't find $35 billion. $35 billion of $6 trillion is just 1/2 of 1%. So we couldn't find 1/2 of 1% of $6 trillion to get the American people some testing. We could have got everybody testing. We could have got everybody tested just to make sure, just to weed this thing out. Because with most people, summer times and, most people get over it, but there's still a couple pocket cases here and there. Get everybody tested. Get everybody on the same, on the same plateau. Get everybody on the same page. But we didn't even do that. We didn't even do that. We didn't get universal basic income for everybody. We didn't get universal health care. We didn't get paid sick leave for everybody. We did expand unemployment, though, an unemployment program which only helps a few people. That was expanded. 6 million people have actually declared unemployment, so that was, that's almost, they had to. They didn't even have a choice on that front. So Boeing got their $17 billion. For half of that, we could have got half of America tested for the coronavirus, but we're not even doing the testing. So we're not even doing step one to fight the coronavirus, epidemic. This pandemic, or this plandemic isn't even being addressed. So we're not even testing. $6 trillion, and we didn't even get any testing out of this damn thing. A bunch of small business loans, forgivable small business loans is what they're telling us. $500 billion changed into $4.5 trillion. So all the major banks, your Morgan Stanley, your AIGs, your Bank of Americas, they're going to get, just washed in, chocolate and gold and diamonds and rubies. Last thing that Thomas Massie talked about was the martial law, the draconian actions. So look at China. People are looking at these authoritarian governments, and it does happen that centralized governments and diseases, the centralizing of governments, concentrating of wealth, the rich get richer and the powerful get more powerful during these crises. And so it's incredible. So even though the rich and the wealthy, they set up this system to where it all just comes tumbling down because, the Chinese flu, the Kung flu, watch out, the Kung flu is coming to a neighborhood near you. And because of the Kung flu, the economy and everything's shut down. So it's all shut down just for this tiny, what if it was actually, what if it was a terrible, like an AIDS or a Spanish flu, bubonic plague kind of thing, So they're doing all these authoritarian measures, and they're saying that, North Korea, China, all the ones that are cracking down, Singapore. I heard that, and I want to say the UK, no, Iceland. Iceland has cops that are finding out who, has the coronavirus, going to their house, asking their friends and their family and their neighbors and shit, making sure nobody has it. Make sure nobody that you talk to caught it and passed it along, because it's asymptomatic, so, you don't know who has it, which makes it, even scarier. You could have it and then, get rid of it and not even know the whole time. Or you could be totally healthy and catch it, 2 months down the road when nobody else is talking about it, and then die, all by yourself because you didn't get it with everybody else. So Thomas Massie was just pointing out one example about the martial law that's happening in Kentucky. He doesn't like the response that's happening in Kentucky right now. Andy Beshear, Democrat governor, he's, saying that people can't even go to church. And, Thomas Massie basically understands a lot of the whole flattening of the curve thing. But Thomas Massie doesn't approve of it because too long you get used to these authoritarian measures, and then it's just, the way it is. So the one example Thomas Massie was talking about, and I believe that this is the same thing. So you had this guy, a man in Kentucky goes to a hospital, and he goes inside the hospital, he gets tested. They actually don't tell him what the test was. They make him sit, they make him stew, they make him wait, he gets tired, and then, after not seeing a doctor or nurse, he just checks himself out, just, takes his gown off, puts his clothes on, and walks the fuck on out. Now, I've been in, some hospitals for, you know, a tiny thing, and they act like, oh, no, we haven't checked you out yet. Well, you're making me sit here like a fucking asshole. What am I waiting on? I don't understand. Nobody's explaining nothing. I like hospitals because they're clean, but they're also institutions filled with psychopaths. Donald Harvey is a Kentuckian who killed dozens of people in a hospital or a nursing home. So most people don't think the nurses and doctors could be killers. But there's a lot of psychopaths out there. And so, yeah, hospitals can feel good because they're clean and sanitary, but they're institutions. So anyways, a guy goes to the hospital, gets tested, nobody tells him anything. He gets tired of sitting in a room by himself, and he leaves. Now, they didn't like that. The hospital's pissed off. No, you can't leave. Well, why not? Is there something going on? Yeah, but we're not going to tell you. So he goes home, and Kentucky Sheriff deputies were sent out to his house. And they stayed stationed outside of his house to make sure he didn't go anywhere and spread the coronavirus to anybody else. So they never told him. They never notified him what the fuck was going on. They're a bunch of fucking goddamn institutional psychopaths. He's sitting in this room by himself. And, you know, who knows if these, you know, doctors are a bunch of Donald Harvey wannabes. Donald Harvey came out of Kentucky. So to think that, you know, some of these damn psychopaths don't work in hospitals and nursing homes, I think is naive. Who's being naive now, Kate? And so, yeah, that is too much. That is too far. That is ridiculous. The hospital didn't treat the guy right. He goes home, and now he's going to, you know, get cops stationed outside of his house. You know, if he wanted treatment or whatever, like it didn't even seem like it was even an option. He never got presented. You've been diagnosed with this. Would you like to get treated? Would you like to stay in the hospital? No, he didn't get told, you know, jack shit. And now you got a bunch of cops at your house because you went to the fucking hospital because you weren't feeling well, so you're doing the responsible thing. And then people freaked out, and everybody else around you, you know, acted stupid. So Thomas Massie said himself he would do a Manhattan Project. He would declare war on the virus. Get everybody 3D printing on ventilators. 3D print this, 3D print that. So get all the ventilators we need. You know, get all the face masks that we need. Figure this out. Find a vaccine. Get a competitive race for the cure going. But Thomas Massie asked us, himself, God, why is America's first instinct during the coronavirus to make sure that rich people keep all their riches? That's the first instinct. Oh, shit! There's a Kung Flu in town. Oh, shit! SARS-2. SARS-2 is back with a vengeance. You thought SARS was gone? SARS is back. And SARS is a baby boomer killer, taking out all the old and infirmed and even healthy people, too. And even maybe taking Tom Hanks and Chris Cuomo and Slim Thug. Killed that one woman, you know, 6 children, beat cancer. So instead of actually using the $6 trillion to attack the coronavirus, instead the first instinct was to make sure the Fed and the Treasury and the banks and the rich and the 1%, make sure the elite, make sure the people that are buying commercial paper, the mortgage-backed securities and the Treasury bills, make sure all the people who are buying the Treasury bills, everybody on the stock market, make sure the better half, make sure the good half of America lives, make sure the good half of America gets some lifeboats first to get off the Titanic. Make sure we save the 1% who caused this entire financial system to be so damn volatile. It's a whole house of cards. And the fact that a Kung Flu can fuck up the entire goddamn economy. Last thing Thomas Massie says is he offers us hope. They're talking about a 4th coronavirus bill, so this could be another $60 trillion bill. So he set a precedent. He's not just a second-rate grandstander, he's a first-rate grandstander. He's actually principled. And that's good. Out of, 300, 400 people in Congress, you only had 1 or 2 principled people. The rest of the motherfuckers just went along with the shit show charade. Oh, there's a shit show charade? Well, let's, all aboard the shit show parade charade. Did you say parade or charade? Well, I like parade, so it doesn't matter if you told me charade anyways. I'm going along with this parade. Did you say shit show? I think you said shit show too, right? So hopefully Thomas Massie, there are more Thomas Massies and more Rand Pauls And if AOC voted against it, more AOCs and Bernie, but more of your Thomas Massies and your Rand Pauls, people that voted against it, they're opposed to it. No, I'm not going along with the flow. I'm standing up for what I believe in. I stand up for my principles. And so that was fantastic. It was fantastic. Thomas Massie. Good job, Thomas Massie. I'm giving this is sincere. I'll give you a standing ovation. Is that? So yeah, good job, Thomas Massie. I'm proud of what you did. I'm glad you did what you did, and by you explaining all this, it makes me understand the situation a lot better. This is what a congressperson is seeing. $6 trillion, all these earmarks. Where the fuck is 95% of the money going? How come we don't even have coronavirus testing? What the fuck is going on? Not, oh no, coronavirus is killing a bunch of old and sick. Let's make sure the rich people keep all their wealth, okay? That's the first thing we got to do. That's the first thing we have to do. And then we'll take care of the coronavirus next.